Hi, good morning all. We'll be starting the session in a couple of minutes. Sorry to keep you waiting in the waiting room there, as is almost inevitable. Just as the session's supposed to start, I get an urgent phone call asking me to do something else. But we're here now, so everything is good. But just give me a couple of seconds just to get the presentation up and let in the people who are in the waiting room, and I'll be right back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, good morning everybody. Welcome to this morning's workshop. I see there's still some people coming in on the waiting room, so we'll give people a couple of minutes to get themselves set up and everything. But in the meantime, can everybody see my presentation screen there? And whilst we're just waiting for the last few people to join us. Can I ask if everyone wouldn't mind changing their names on the, thanks Dimitro, if everyone wouldn't mind changing their names on the participants list to their first name and the organization that they're from, just so that we've got a quick way of seeing who's actually in the room, and that'd be awesome. So yeah, I can see there's still a few people logging in, so maybe give it another 60 seconds or so before we kick off. I suppose you want to see my face as well. I'm not quite sure why, but there we go. Let me put my camera on. How's that? Fantastic. Hey Nadine, were you about to say something there?
No, just that it's nice to see your face. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And still they come. Hey, Bamasili. Jazz, cool, 22, I think, right, okay. So, there's a flanker piece, fantastic. So, I think everyone's here now, all those stragglers can catch up, we can get going, I think. So, yeah, good morning, thanks for taking a bit of time and joining us. This is an optional workshop, so it's good to see so many people have turned up for it, and we're calling this Google Analytics and Masterclass in Measurement. I had a look at thank you very much to those people who filled in the short Q&A before the session. That was really, really useful because it gives me an idea of kind of how people use Google Analytics or other analytics engines before the session. So I've changed tweaked what I was planning to say a little bit based on that. But what I will say is from the feedback forms, what was really apparent was there was a lot of very different levels of experience using Google Analytics. So the format of this workshop is really I don't want it to be me telling you what to do, or the whole 2 hours. I think, those people who are more familiar with Google Analytics, please feel free to jump in, unmute yourself, talk. Let me know if there's something I'm doing that you think is better, because it's one of those things that there's always a dozen different ways to do something and get to an end goal. And just because I do things in a particular way doesn't mean they're necessarily even the best way. I'm sure there are many hacks and tweaks for Google Analytics that I've not come across yet. So if you do see something where you think, hey, I do that but better, please jump in and share, and we can all learn from each other as part of the experience here. So so to get started, we are recording this session, but there are certain parts of it where I will turn the recording off. And the reason for that is because, or pause the recording. The reason for that is because I want to show you some of the dashboards and data use that I use personally in different roles outside of Hill, and obviously that's highly commercially sensitive, and I shouldn't be showing you. So I'd really appreciate it if for those sort of sections where I'm demoing dashboards and things, you don't take screenshots. And we'll exclude those from the recording, but I think they'd be worthwhile. Just showing you some of the things that you can do with Google Analytics as we go forward. So it's a short session. We've only got a couple of hours, so I'm not going to go around and a full round of introductions, but if you wouldn't mind, as I say, just changing your participant name, so we've got your name and the organization that you're here representing. Obviously, I know the cohort from Southern Africa very well. I'm not so familiar with the names and representatives from organizations around the world. It would just help me out enormously, and the rest of the whole team as well, if we can just identify who is speaking or chatting at a glance. So excuse me. So that'd be really appreciated. And again, feel free to use the chat window to ask questions, make comments, raise your hand, or just jump in and say something as we go forward. So why am I teaching hosting a workshop on Google Analytics? A little bit about me. For those who don't know me, my name's Adam Oxford. I'm the head of the Hill Hub in Southern Africa. Adele, sorry, I'm looking at there's nobody in the waiting room at the moment, nobody trying to get in. So I'm not sure where the other account is, but we can't see them on this side in the queue. I'm not sure if that helps at all. Adele, sorry, I just saw your note in the chat there. Okay. So back to my introduction. So about me, so I'm Adam Oxford. I'm the head of the Hill Hub in Southern Africa. I've been an entrepreneur, so I run several startups, digital strategist. My background is in journalism. And the one thing that I'm absolutely not is a coder. So I've run a lot of websites, been responsible for a lot of digital-only products and introducing metrics and measurements and trying to instill data-driven product design in a lot of different online products. But I'm not actually a coder. I've got a smattering of different bits of programming that I've picked up over the years. I can find my way around a pretty complex WordPress site with ease, but I'm not a developer. So, and I think, for me, it's always important to look at these kinds of tools from the point of view of a team that may not be totally technical, because what we always emphasize very heavily in the Hill programs is using metrics to guide product development, to make decisions, to see what's working, to guide experiments, all of the stuff that we've talked about in the last workshop and throughout the boot camp and so on. But getting that data out of your products, if you've not got a strong development team, and even if you have got a strong development team, sometimes is not always as straightforward as it seems. So the question is always, how do you get the data you need? And I think, particularly if you, like a lot of our startups, don't have a huge technical budgets or the right members of staff to guide their technical teams in development to build in measurements in the right place. So this is what we looked at last week, the pirate funnel canvas, and obviously we were talking about how we use different metrics and measurements to build up to that one North Star measurement and try and waterfall and cascade them backwards so that every action and interaction on our products gives us information that is actionable. And really, Google Analytics is kind of the starting point for figuring out how to get these measurements and so on into your products. So before we begin, there's about 30 people on the call. We got a dozen or so people replied to the questionnaire. Can I just take a quick poll in the chat? Can everybody just let me know either yes or no if you're actually using Google Analytics in your apps, websites, or other digital products already? Just a quick yes/no poll in the chat there. Are you using Google Analytics? Yes, cool. Yeah. No. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. So for those of you who aren't using it, the principles here apply to whatever measurement tools you are using. If you already have something, up and running, or obviously one of the actions you can take off the back of this is to go away and implement Google Analytics straight away. So I'm really keen to find out as well what you're hoping to get out of this session. Like I said, we don't have time to go around everybody and do full introductions, but if there's anything specific that you're hoping to get out of this session that wasn't in the pre-session form, if anybody wants to sort of suggest something, or does anybody have particular expectations they'd like to share with the group right now? I can just pick on people to speak, but yeah, if you've got any thoughts or something you'd like to particularly focus on or hopes, then please just unmute yourself and let us know. Anybody want to be brave and go first?
Yes, I want to be brave.
Excellent. Thanks, Amir. Sorry, is it Amir? Is it Adele? Sorry, I can't see on the.
My name is Amir, and
Amir.
And the application's name is Adel, not Adele. But I like both.
Cool.
So my question is, well, the thing that I'm focusing on is how to understand the data in a development point of view. How to understand the data in a way to inform my decision making when it relates to development, design, and to avoid high bounce rate. All of these matters that relate to the user's experience on the platform.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll definitely, what we'll do, I'll definitely come back to that. I think that's really important. That this is not just about introducing metrics and measurements. It's about how we influence them to guide product design. So we can definitely come back and chat about that towards the end of the session. But I'll make a note to bring that up. Definitely, Amir. Thanks for that. It's very good. Oleg, just interesting because I have a great experience. Yeah, fantastic. And I'm hoping we can share a few tips, Oleg, and you can teach me something by the end of the session as well if you've already had a great experience with Google Analytics. Anybody else? Got any thoughts or particular expectations or requests for things to focus on?
I think for my part, this is Solomon from KYR Africa.
Hi, Solomon.
Yes, hi, Adam. Yeah, I think for my part, because my role in the organization is purely content creation, when my guys are talking numbers and metrics, I usually switch off completely. So my take home from this class would be basically to understand how to better effect the metrics on my content creation, because if I understand what is fast moving, so to speak, I can be able to concentrate my efforts on certain parts of the production. Yes.
Fantastic, cool. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, and hopefully some of that will come out as we go through. And again, you know, if we'll come back to it at the end and make sure that we're answering that question. I think, yeah, very important, and kind of related, I think, to what Amir was saying as well. Yeah, has anybody else got any thoughts or expectations that they wanted to share before we press on? Cool. Okay. So why do we use Google Analytics? It's hugely popular. Why is it hugely popular? Because it's free. Because the reason that it's free means that everybody uses it, and because everybody uses it, there's some data in there which can be cross-referenced with other sites, particularly around things like user demographics and Google's guess as to how old or what gender people are when they're using your site. That it builds up about users based on their behavior in other sites. So Google Analytics is free. It's pretty universal because it's been around for so long, and it's pretty universal. It's pretty well understood. There's a lot of, sorry, typo there, should be well understood, not well understand. Pretty well understood. There's a whole internet full of advice and tips and setup guides and how to use it. And it's also really advanced. I mean, even in the free version of Google Analytics, you know, there's not a lot of data that you can't pull out in the format that you want it, if you know how. So most of the time, I think most people interact with Google Analytics using the sort of standard dashboards. And if you're familiar with Google Analytics, you know, you've got that standard dashboard with all of the different options on the left-hand side. And that's pretty comprehensive in terms of slicing and dicing the data about what users are doing whilst they're on site. I'm going to use the terminology on site throughout the session, but it obviously also applies to apps with analytics built in and stuff like that. Oh, sorry, you can't hear me. Is that? Hang on a second. Sasa, is that better? Can you hear me now? Is anybody else having problems hearing me, or maybe I just need to speak a little bit louder? Okay, so basically, what was it? Fantastic. So what I was saying, what was I saying? Yeah. So basically, a lot of people interact with Google Analytics just on those kind of basic dashboards because they do slice and dice the data in most of the ways that look like they're what we need. But underneath the hood, there is a huge amount of stuff you can do with the data that analytics captures. That isn't immediately obvious at all. And really, you know, coming back to that question about those questions about, you know, how does analytics relate to design and what we do with product design, really from our point of view, you know, over the period of the 4 months of the program, what we're really emphasizing is to try and help you instill that experimental mindset inside your organizations. So you have the ability to say, this is my hypothesis, this is something I think is going to work for my product, or this is how I'm going to change the wording of a particular page, and I think this is going to get people clicking on a particular element more. How do we test that? We run a test on the site, but we have to measure those tests, and Google Analytics is absolutely fantastic for that. You know, you can pull out data that tells you pretty much straight away if coloring a headline blue or red results in more people clicking through clicking through on a particular headline. So we probably won't have time to go into that level of A/B testing and the hardcore product design stuff, which is maybe something we can follow up on later on in the program. We can make a note for it. But really, it's about saying it's about using the data to say, I want to change this, so I'm going to test it. How am I going to measure it? What's my baseline? What's the overall performance of the site? And how do I evaluate my lean experiments and consider them successful or not? So I won't have time to go into things like cohort analysis and stuff like that, but it's definitely something we can chat about at a later date. I've lost my navigation button. Why not Google Analytics? There are a lot of problems with using Google Analytics. It's fantastic, it's fully featured, it's brilliant, there's loads of advice. There is almost too much advice. There is advice going back, I think it's been around for about 15, 16 years now. Some of the advice is outdated, some of the advice is plain rubbish. The Google help is terrible. As with any Google products, it's very poorly documented. Even if you are a high-level programmer, it can be very difficult to interpret some of Google's documentation sometimes. And unless you're paying for analytics through the 360 version, there is no real support to speak of. There's support forums and peer-to-peer support, but again, you know, it's not particularly great. And some of the really good features, some of the stuff that we want to use it for, and not immediately obvious to set up and use. And you know, that comes back to the question about it not being particularly well documented and not having support. So you know, there's always that question of, you know, if you're not paying for it, what can you expect? But it is a challenge. It is a challenge to get some of the useful data out of it. Which is one of the reasons we wanted to do this workshop, because we tell people to measure and assess everything, but then don't really give them unless we're giving people the tools to do it and reliable tools to do it. You know, they're not going to be able to put some of our other advice into practice. One cautionary tale, things to watch out for. Some of the data that Google Analytics generates can be very, very misleading, and particularly, as somebody mentioned, the bounce rate earlier on. So as we're digging into those metrics and looking at the pirate metrics funnel, you know, our advice is always to focus on the meaningful metrics. Don't focus on the vanity metrics. Look at what's actually going to change your growth and impact. And usually that relates back to indicators. Sorry, my dogs are barking. Indicators around user engagement. So we're not necessarily interested in how many people come to our site, but we are interested in how long they stay on site, what they do on there, and how quickly they leave it. And typically, you know, the top level reporting you'll get out of Google Analytics are things like average time on page. Here we've got a screenshot. Average time on page is 3 minutes. We can take that to mean people spend on average 3 minutes on a page. That sounds quite good. You know, a lot of people bounce off a page after 10 seconds or so. Bounce rate of 90%, that seems very high. A bounce rate is the measurement of the people who arrive on a page and leave that page without doing anything else on your site. So they read the page, then go away. So 90% bounce rate sounds very high. And then the exit percent is the number of people who left your site on that page. So if that's your opening page and you're expecting them to do something else on site, 83% is very high. If it's a checkout, when they bought something, you would expect that to be the last page they visit and their time on site. Now, immediately you can see you know, that these numbers don't always make sense. Why is the bounce rate 90% but the exit rate at 83%? That doesn't make any sense. You know, if we're measuring the number of people who viewed this page and then left, and that's 9 out of 10 people, why is it only 8 out of 10 people recorded this as their last page on the site? So the problem with these engagement metrics, and the thing to be super careful about, is that what we think of a session, or how we think Google measures stuff and how it actually measures stuff are slightly different. So obviously Google can only measure something when there is a start point and an end point. It's not running a little script in the background of your browser with a timer going that tells you how long somebody's been on page that stops when they leave. If there's an action taken to start the session, there's an action taken to finish the session. And quite often that second action to finish a session isn't recorded. And there can be several reasons for that. It can be because there's something else you've set up on your site, another part of the, something else you've set up on Google Analytics that is blocking that second action. But also a session duration times out after 30 minutes. So if I visit your site and I leave my browser open, my browser window open for the rest of the day in a tab, after 30 minutes, any other activity on that tab will get recorded as the start of a new session, and the previous session didn't finish, so it's recorded as a bounce with 0 time on page. So we have to be really, really careful with these metrics because they can be very, very misleading, particularly you know, and very, very highly dependent on the structure of your site. So it's definitely worth thinking about. And there's always you know, always the chance of misconfiguration as well. So my mea culpa recently, shortly after I started a job at a newspaper here, I managed to record the newspaper as having its most successful month online by a factor of 3. We couldn't believe it that in a month we'd hit our objective of increasing page views by 200% overnight. And the way we did that was we screwed up the implementation of the analytics code, and we were actually recording every page view as 3 page views. So obviously we tripled our number of page views overnight. And the way, but importantly, the way we caught that and realized what we'd done, or I realized what I'd done, it was totally my fault, is that we had a second set of analytics running off of the web host just to cross-reference things, so we could see, you know, when there's a mistake in configuration because we were getting some data from somewhere else that that was contradicting it. So I would strongly advise that, that whatever you're doing to measure performance of your site or app, you have a second set of metrics running, even if it's much more lightweight, if it's not so in depth, but just to cross-reference with and flag up any particular issues with implementation. Because implementation can be caught out by a whole bunch of things, including, you know, putting the wrong code in, but also how your caching engine is set up on the website and things like that. Okay, so that's the warning. Now into the more useful stuff. So what is Google Analytics? Seems like a really obvious question, but right now it's not totally obvious. Google's in the middle of migrating, or about a year ago it launched a new version of analytics called Google Analytics 4. So the current most commonly used version of analytics is Universal Analytics, which is if you have a piece of script on your site that includes the phrase gtag.js, that's Universal Analytics, and that's still the most widely used, and to be honest, the one I would recommend you using right now, just because it is, as I say, it's well understood and there's a lot of documentation out there. Google Analytics 4 has been around for just under a year. In many ways, it's simpler to use and more sophisticated than Universal Analytics, but it's still not, I personally don't feel like it's quite production ready yet, and doesn't have quite the same level of tooling for people to use. But the basic principles are the same. And then the third thing I wanted to just mention is Google Tag Manager, which if you start using analytics, you'll see a lot. It's a separate application that's based on as part of Google's Cloud Suite or Cloud Marketing Suite. I can't remember what they call it. And Google sells Tag Manager for implementing analytics on the basis that it is much easier to create tags and implement them on your site using Tag Manager. I don't use Tag Manager. I can't speak with authority on it. I'm a little bit old school. I've never taken the time to learn it and re-implement all of the tagging on the sites with Tag Manager. And to be honest, what I have seen of it, or what I have used of it, I personally much prefer the more direct route of adding little bits of code into a website rather than trying to use the data abstraction layer that comes in with Tag Manager. So if anybody does have Tag Manager experience and can really strongly recommend it and tell me why I need to learn it and use it from here on in, I'd love to catch up after the session, and you know, maybe we can adopt this for next year, or have a learning group on Tag Manager for the rest of the team. But it's not something I'm going to dig into today because it's a big topic, and it's not something I can speak with authority on. So the basics of Google Analytics, for those, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's even, I don't know, even marketing. I'm just too old school. I think I'm too set in my ways. I can't get, I can't rethink the entire way of doing analytics at the moment. But I probably should. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. So the basics, for those people who aren't familiar with it, the kind of the four key terms I think to know are users. And these are measured in two different ways in the standard reporting. So you'll see users, which is the number of people who visited the site, or the number of people who visited the site, and then page views, which is obviously the number of pages that have been viewed over a particular period. You'll also see in the analytics terminology the word unique crop up a lot as well. So when you start digging down into the different views, you'll see page views and unique page views, and that's kind of basically what that's saying is this is the page views is the number of time a page has been viewed. Unique page views is the number of people who've looked at that page. So if I reload a page, I'll count as 2 page views, but only 1 unique page view. And the same with sessions. So sessions is recorded. That's the number of sessions, the number of times people have visited the site, which is obviously, you know, these 3 are all very closely related. So users times session times page views and so on. But you'll also see unique sessions, which is, again, you know, if I'm, it kind of translates to what we more commonly call unique users, and the number of individuals who visited the site. So if I visit the site twice in one day, I'll count as 2 sessions, but only 1 unique session. And then real time, obviously, the real time views show you what's happening at any given moment in time, and they're really useful for checking that the new features work. I think for the most part, analytics data is most useful when sort of aggregated over a period of time, but the real-time views can be very useful for testing new features and making sure that any new implementations of analytics are working. So cool. Confusing bits, yeah, I've been through those. Duplicate sites. So okay, so let's take a look at what happens in Google Analytics. So I'm just going to open up a new window here. I'm not going to stop recording here because I don't need to. Actually, let me take that away. I might need to stop recording. Okay. Yep. Good job I didn't put that one up. Sorry, just whilst I'm setting this up, has anybody got any questions so far? Does everything make sense, or anything particularly confusing? No. Cool. Okay. So so this is obviously it's one of the lower traffic websites that I run, and is very it's a hobby site, so I don't mind sharing it with you. But this is kind of the first thing you'll see when you log into Google Analytics. They have this sort of default homepage that tells you a little bit about audience over the last week. And obviously you can change these widgets to show particular times, the real-time users active right now, where they come from, and what pages they visit. And it's kind of, a lot of people sort of stop there and don't go any further, but those of you who've used analytics a lot, there's obviously quite a lot of information down on the left-hand side here. So the key ones that we're going to talk about today are audience acquisition and behavior. Audience tells you about who is visiting your site, and this is where you can drill down. It's all very, very self-explanatory. I mentioned the demographics, so Google will take a guess as to who's using your site by age and gender and interests. The age and gender really are guesses. That's based on people's browsing behavior on other sites. The interests less so, because it's based on people's browsing behavior on other sites. But obviously none of this is individually identifiable, and GDPR contravening when it comes to looking at stuff on your site. So if I click on age, it'll tell me something about the users of their sites, and because we haven't got no idea for the last week. Sorry, I'll click away from there. But the more interesting stuff on audience is obviously the audience overview. You know, how many users you've had in the time period, how many new users, how many sessions they had. Sessions per user is a really, really useful metric of engagement, probably for a lot of sites, almost the single most important measure of engagement. If you're looking to grow an audience who's going to take action and buy a product from you. Page views we went through, pages per session. Again, you know, how many pages do people view on average whilst they're here? Time, session time, bounce rate, and importantly, you've got all of the options up here to change the date range that you're looking from. You can introduce a comparative date range to compare a set of data to previous sessions, to previous dates rather. So this is month of August, so the last 3 weeks, the last stupid date range, usually the last 2.5 weeks compared to the 2.5 weeks before that. The orange line shows you the 2.5 weeks before that, and obviously this starts to get a little bit clustered down here when we look at the comparison data, language that people are reading in. It's all pretty self-explanatory as far as the top level of users goes. Acquisition overview tells you where people came from to get to your site. This is incredibly important when you're looking at the impact of marketing and social media marketing and content marketing. You know, are people arriving at your site from a search engine? Are they arriving at your site by typing the name into their browser? Are they coming from an email you've sent out, or are they coming from social media? I'll dig into the acquisition. Sorry, I'll dig into that in a little bit. Sorry. And then the final one is, and then the most useful one, the one where you'll spend your most of your time, is actually on behavior. I always often wonder why this isn't top of the list to look at, because behavior is telling you what people do when they're on your site. So this is where we can track what pages people looked at. So I'm just going to turn the comparison off so it's a little bit clearer. Where we can track what pages people looked at, and what they did on their way to and from a particular page. So the overview section here, if you use this a lot, is not where I would spend my time personally. The site content all pages is really where when I'm using a default Google dashboard, this is where I spend most of my time, is actually in this section here down in site content all pages, because this actually tells you by page what people are doing, both across the whole site and by individual pages. So you can see the / here, that's our homepage. 60 people viewed the homepage. Sorry, I'll say that again. 57 people viewed the homepage. There were 60 views of the homepage, which meant that 3 people viewed it twice. They spent a minute and a half on there with the caveat we had before. Of the 349 page views on the site as a whole, or the 332 users on the site as a whole, 54 of them entered on the homepage. And there's a pretty high bounce rate and so on. Like I say, this is a hobby site, so I'm not too concerned about the actual metrics on here. I'm just using this as a demo. And this is really where you can start pulling out a lot of information about you know, how people are using the site. Quick tip here. By default, this will show you the trailing part of the URL that people visited. That's not particularly easy to read as a human, but it's also going to separate out URLs that have a UTM code or anything trailing after the final /, which I'll explain a little bit more about those later on. But if you're looking at kind of top level information about your site, this little button at the top here, this little option here to switch from page to page title, is really, well, you know, that's where, for those of you who are more involved with the kind of overall performance, this is much more useful, because this will put everything that links to these particular pages under the page heading. So if I've got several different URLs all leading to the same page, they all get aggregated as one page heading here, which is the page title, obviously. And it's easier to read when you're looking at an analytics report. So that's the 3 main sections. And sorry, hang on a second. One of the other nice things that you've probably played around with if you've looked at it at all is there's some nice default visualizations in analytics that tells you a little bit about user journeys as they arrive at your site. So the behavior flow gives you a map of, you know, out of this traffic over this particular period, what page did people land on, what was the next page in the flow, and how many interactions did they have on the site before they dropped off. So here you can see people started on the home page for the most part. Went to the about page, interestingly enough, as the most popular click from the about page, or they went to this something else category and then click through a couple more times. And that's telling me immediately, one of the interesting things that's telling me immediately here is that people who stayed on site for 3 pages overwhelmingly started on the home page. So I've got a little bit of a data insight straight away there about kind of what that tells me about the audience. People who go straight to my homepage, who type the name of my site into their browser, are more likely to stay on the site longer than anybody else. Which is, you know, it's obviously, it sounds obvious, but now I've got a little bit of data here to back that up. And tells me something about customer loyalty, and I can dig down into these numbers if I want to start digging through those. The problem with the default views is that they do tend to aggregate everything that's really important and not separate it out. So the behavior view, you can see down here, there's 52 more pages with a starting place for customer journeys through the site. And if you've got a big site, that's not particularly helpful, because we're going to want to dig down to stuff on the actual page page level. So that's the three main categories: audience, acquisition, behavior. So I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper into some of these. I'm going to go back to the acquisition section. And one thing that has always been a problem for Google Analytics and is increasingly a problem with the introduction of browsers that block cookies and tracking codes by default, and some of the changes that Google itself has made to its search engine technology. The acquisition is open to interpretation a little bit. So if I look at this this acquisition chart for naked data, it seems straightforward enough when I look at it. Organic search is obviously traffic from usually Google, but also Bing. Social media is traffic from Facebook and Twitter. Email is traffic from that is identifiable as having come from a newsletter. I'm disappointed that's so low, since we are a newsletter site rather than a website, but then we don't really push people to our website from the newsletter. But then that leaves us with these three other areas: direct, other, and referral. And the problem is that the purpose of the direct traffic identification is supposed to be people who go straight to your website. They don't come from anywhere else. They type your URL into their web browser. But unfortunately, Google lumps a whole bunch of stuff into the direct traffic category, and depending on the size and popularity of your site, it can be really, really misleading. For example, one of the biggest components of direct traffic for many sites actually comes from Google. Google has three different ways that it drives traffic to sites. One of them is Google Search, one of them is Google News, and then there's Google Discover, which is the homepage when you open the Google app on your phone, or the list of stories that appears in Chrome when you open a Chrome browser. And that's an algorithm that Google uses to identify stories and web pages that it thinks you're going to be interested in. So it's gathering data about you, it's learning your habits online, and it's telling you what it thinks you're going to be interested in reading today. And unfortunately, that data does not get passed to Google Analytics. So on the newspaper I work on, Google Discover can be our biggest source of traffic. In a day, we can get 200,000 readers a day coming from Google Analytics, Google Discover or more, but they all appear in Analytics as lumped in with our direct traffic as part of the and look like people who are actually coming to our site because they love us rather than because they've seen us in Google Discover. So that is a huge problem. There's other forms of dark traffic, what Google calls dark traffic, which includes browsers that have chopped off any referral codes, or don't accept cookies over long periods of time. So all of that stuff that basically Google's not sure about, it now dumps into direct, and that's becoming very, very misleading when it comes to looking at acquisition. So what I would say is that alongside Google Analytics, it's really worth getting to know Google Search Console. Has anybody used Google Search Console at all? Or uses it regularly to cross-reference the results in what Google Analytics is telling them about their site? Cool. Oleg says yes. There's excellent. Yeah. I see. Popular with the Ukrainians. Fantastic. Couple of reasons that you should get to know Google Search Console. One, again, it provides that cross-reference point so you can check your data and analytics is right, because it will tell you how many people saw a search result that came from your site in Google. Yeah, SEO definitely, it's definitely a big part of SEO, and something that I think we'll go into in more detail in the marketing workshops later on. From analytics point of view, it basically means you can cross-reference these numbers that analytics is telling you with the ones in Search Console to make sure your analytics and implementation is correct and giving you good data, but also you can start to unpick what's coming through Google Discover rather than search or direct. So it's really useful for unpicking this direct category in analytics when it comes to acquisition. The other thing that it's sort of essential for is that Google Analytics can't read the actual search term that people looked for when they came to your site in Google search. It is crazy, it makes no sense, but because of the encryption from Google search, that data is not passed to analytics. So this not provided, where I am now, still in the acquisition tab. I'm looking at the traffic that came via search, and what this is telling me is that for 98% of the people who came from a search engine, we don't know what they searched for to get to our site. It's not provided. The keywords are not provided. You can get that data out of Search Console, so you can see what terms people are using to find your site, which is incredibly valuable when you're looking at SEO. You know, what is it people are looking for when they come to your sites? Should be guiding your site design or app design, and the language and wording you use when it comes to marketing and publicizing that app. So definitely get to know Search Console, because you know, as far as you know, the vast majority of internet traffic is concerned, it starts with Google. So understanding those flows is going to be vital. I just want to mention, I'm not going to go into any detail about this, but I thought worth mentioning whilst we're on the topic. And again, this comes back more to marketing than analytics. Site speed is becoming more and more important when it comes to getting traffic from search engines, and particularly from Google search. And there's a nice link there which you can pull out of the presentation when we share it with you at the end. And this lets you test pages on your site and makes recommendations for how to speed them up. And Yaroslav mentioned that you use Search Console for looking at site speed as well. Solomon, you turned your microphone off. Did you on rather? Did you want to say something?
No. I was just I was typing and then it came back on. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. That's right. Please do, if anybody has any comments or questions or wants me to clarify anything, I'm kind of rushing through things quite quickly. Please do just stop me, put your hand up, or mention something in the chat. Okay, I'm going to push on now into the sort of more nitty gritty of analytics and the stuff that's going to be really useful for you when you come to site design. The first thing I wanted to talk about is audience segmentation. And for the most part, when we're looking at analytics data, most of us will kind of use these default dashboards and the default setup and look at the audience as a whole. But really, you know, if you're familiar with any kind of product development or the lean startup philosophy that we've been introducing over the last few weeks, you'll know that our audience, we can generally split our audiences into three different types of users. You've got your super fans, your heavy users, the brand lovers, whatever it is you want to call them, the people who come back, use your products time and time again, who are going to be the first people to buy anything new you produce or give you money if you're looking for contributions for your services or buy your products. You've got the middle section of the audience, the people who could probably be turned into a super fan or a heavy user with just the right kind of nudges on site and tweaking the way that you do things. Your sort of prospective customers or loyalists is another way of describing them. There's lots of different terminology around. I tend to use brand lovers, prospective loyalists, and then the final group of people, the casual users who find your site through Google search, read a page, bounce off, and we don't really care about them. They're a vanity metric. They're not really helping us to do anything at all. So there's a really nice feature in analytics which I don't think is as heavily used as it should be, to help you split out the audience by segment. So if we want to see people who arrived at our site, sorry, if we want to see to look at a particular audience segment, we can actually do that from the main Google dashboard. So I don't think it's going to work with this particular site. So I'm just going to pause the recording. Okay. Okay, so you can see with naked data, hey, we had one brand lover who visited the site more than 5 times. I want to find that person and shake them by the hand. That's fantastic. But what we can also do is create new segments based on certain parameters. So I can either say, you know, how did people that Google thinks are between the ages of 35 and 44 and are male or female use the site? I don't think this is going to give me anything particularly useful. But I can create a quick segment here. And this might be really useful if I'm developing a legal service that is targeting a particular or is designed for a particular user group. You know, is that user group using my site? And if not, then who are the people who are using it? Maybe there's something I need to think about in terms of product design or a new part of the product that's going to appeal to those people who aren't in this particular I've set it up as a demographic segment there. So this is really, I think, vastly underused elements of analytics and super easy to set up. I mean, you can see it takes like 2 seconds to start creating these segments. But once you've created them, they will then filter through to all of the different views in analytics. So now I can see, you know, who's been reading this particular page by all users, and this particular gender and age demographic here. So you know, this gives me the ability to get much richer information out of analytics than the top line stuff, because I mean, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily rely on Google for these estimates because they're the least accurate part of analytics, but you can think of other ways that that you want to break those up. The only place that the audience segmentation doesn't work, and this is really frustrating. It is possible if you access analytics via the API, but we have these real-time dashboards for analytics, and we can create custom dashboards that include real-time measurements, and we can't separate these out by audience segmentation. It's something that I find very frustrating. I would love to know if there are 100 brand lovers on my site right now, because then I can start pushing pop-up ads to them and things like that and change the messaging. But we can't do that in the default Google Analytics, unfortunately. So that's the only main limitation of audience segmentation. Otherwise, it's probably the most powerful tool in your toolbox to get to know, you know, how different people are using your site. And that's going back to those questions about how do we take analytics and put it into product development. That's how we start understanding different user needs through the way they interact with our site. And we identify users using different audience parameters. Behavior shows us what people are reading. Another quick hack that we can show you on behavior that is super cool, and again, a massively underused feature, I think. Sorry, let me just go back to all users. Okay, so here we can see the breakdown of site usage by page on site. You'll notice all of these different elements often have extra menus to explore, extra options. And when you're looking at behavior, you remember we were saying the behavior flow is quite cool, but it's a little bit too high end to get anything really meaningful out of. And whilst you can dig into these and change the pages around and things like that, it's often more trouble than it's worth, to be honest. What I personally find more useful is this tag at the top of the default behavior view, the site content all pages, where you see the navigation summary, because this doesn't tell me the top line information. This tells me by page what people did on site immediately before or immediately after visiting a page. So for this one, this is the home page / I can see that over this particular period of time, there were 37 page views. The drop-down menu is there where it says current selection. That's my page selection. For those people who went to a page before they got to the home page, 2 of them came from our About page, and the next thing they clicked on, 2 people, it was the About page, and somebody else clicked on, I don't even know what this link is, SMAP. So that's really important to know. And I'm going to show you. Okay. So the other thing that you've probably come across when you've looked at Google Analytics and is really badly documented, in my not so humble opinion, is events. By default, Google records things like the session start, the session end, page views, previous page, next page. It doesn't actually capture an awful lot of other stuff by default. Everything else is sort of interpreted from those few data points. So you know, the technology is obviously captured in terms of what your user agent in the browser is telling analytics it is, whether it's on a mobile phone or all of those kinds of things. But there's only a few data points that it captures by default. What we're really interested in analytics, and particularly when we're looking at analytics for product design, is events. What happens? How many people clicked this button? How many people started this video? How many people scrolled this far into a page? And each one of those is a unique event that we need to capture, and it won't be captured by default. So we can see on that behavior tree that people went from one page to another page, but we don't know if they clicked the button at the top of the screen or the button at the bottom of the screen. And actually, those kinds of pieces of information are super useful for us, because if we know nobody's clicking the button at the top of the screen and they only click the button when they get to the bottom, we can use that page space for something else, or maybe we need to redesign the button at the top of the page. So the way we capture all of that is through events, and in Google Analytics 4, everything is actually an event under the hood. If you're interested in that, feel free to go away and look it up. And in Google Analytics 4, events are captured just by one particular tag. But in Universal Analytics, every event has 3 dimensions. It has an event category, an event action, and an event label. And that's captured through a little piece of code, which I must remember to take that last quote mark off at the end of it. A little bit of code here, which very simply says, hey Google, GTag is happening. This is an event, and the event action is this, and the event action is part of this event category and this event label. 9 times out of 10, if I'm honest, I don't bother adding the category and label. And if I do add them, I very rarely actually use them. But if you're tracking a lot of stuff on site, it can be useful to keep those for formatting stuff. So it looks a little bit complicated, a little bit daunting if you're not a developer, but the implementation is actually really simple. And this is the the part which the implementation part I've spoken to, and again, sorry, again, there's a different way of doing this if you're using Tag Manager, so you can ignore this if you're using Tag Manager. But I've spoken to a lot of developers and a lot of very experienced people who, unless they are interested in the metrics on their website, have never actually figured out how to implement events, unique events on their website. And it's really, really easy to do if you know how. So the most useful ways of creating events, I'm going to presume that everyone has a basic understanding of HTML, or they can pass this on to somebody in their team who does. But when we're creating a HTML link, sorry, I'll just open this up here. So usually when we create a HTML link, we create the link, which is created by the HTML reference, HTML reference, and then sorry, I'm typing on different screens, I can't see what I'm doing. So if I wanted to create a link to our website, the basic structure would look like that in the back end of a website. So I'm hoping everyone's familiar with that. I've got a very basic link tag telling me that when this text appears on a website, it'll appear probably blue and underlined. You can click on it and it'll take you to sa.hill.org. To put a tracking tag in there, I just take that code that we had before, gtag your event, etc., 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 and drop it inside the first part of that ahref tag with this little instruction to the browser that says when somebody clicks on this, fire this code here, or run this code here, which is the gtag event click button click button. So I've got my event action, my event category, my event label, all inside that first tag there, and then the closing a tag will obviously be after the link there. So this is where we then put the on click inside there, etc., etc. I won't type it out all that now. So it's really, really easy to do, and really, really useful. And that means every time somebody clicks on that button now, I will see it reported in the events part of Google Analytics, and there aren't any setup on naked data. So I'm just going to pull training stuff. Any questions or comments on events? I mean, it's such an important thing to get to grips with, and like I say, not particularly. I don't feel particularly well documented at all. Does anybody use events on their site already? Is this new to anybody, or any thoughts or comments about it? Is there anybody out there? Am I talking to myself?
No, we are here.
Just checking. Yeah.
We're with you.
I just think this part many people are not very.
So if anybody wants me to repeat anything, then please say. I'm trying to kind of get through as much as possible, and obviously there is a whole ton of detail behind all of this stuff that we can dig into or give advice on as you go through the program. But yes, Sietsa.
Yes. No, I was just telling you that you're not alone.
Cool. But and is this starting to is this looking like something you can use and want to go away and build into the site straight away? Definitely,
but the question that we were talking about with my colleagues is the Google Analytics on mobile apps. Since I think in our case we only are having a mobile app at the moment. We're only using a mobile app. Does it work then?
Yeah. No, it all works on mobile apps. The one thing that is a And one thing that is a problem is actually not mobile apps. It works pretty much the same way in an app as it does on a website.
Okay.
But AMP pages are a real pain. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with AMP pages, the accelerated mobile pages, but it's a game. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
You're saying with what? With what pages?
With AMP pages. So AMP, if anybody's working on a website, sorry, I'll just try and put something. So if anybody's working on a website right now, you're probably familiar with AMP, particularly if you're working on a WordPress site. You'll probably have seen this come up a few times. So AMP is a framework that was designed by Google in order to take out a lot of the heavyweight code and speed up pages on mobile. So it doesn't support a lot of doesn't support PHP code or a lot of JavaScript. You know, it's basically a simplified version of your pages, which if you adopt it can be really good, because Google lets you, particularly if you've got a blog or a regularly updated section of your site, if you publish your pages both in regular HTML and AMP formats, and usually the AMP format is indicated by a suffix to the URL. So if I go to so if I go to the Mail and Guardian and I click on this story, this is a Q&A section. So if people are coming and reading this story in Google News or Google Discover, or even within Google search results, what they'll actually see is a simplified version of this page.
I can add a few comments for this question about mobile application, because Google Analytics can be better matched with Firebase. If you know, Firebase, it's also Google service. It's a multiple service from hosting, storage, any crash analytics or something another. And analytics is one of the part of this Firebase. So you can Google Firebase and you will find any answer about Google Analytics for mobile application. Because AMP pages, it's only for websites, but useful for mobile users.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Yeah, definitely. Firebase is great. I've not had a huge amount of experience with Firebase personally, but yeah, that's a really good recommendation. Yeah, so sorry, I don't want to get too sidetracked with AMP, but just to kind of point out, this is a slightly different version of the website rendered for AMP, which cuts out a lot of the interactive elements and stuff, but it also breaks a lot of the analytics and makes the analytics much harder, slightly harder, easier in some ways, but harder in others, particularly when you're looking at events and stuff to implement. Cool. Okay, the other thing that's worth looking at when you're looking at tracking behavior on site is UTM codes, or basically any query that's put into the end of a URL. So if you're not familiar with UTM codes, you've definitely seen them when you click on a link off of Twitter or Facebook or in a newsletter or in an app. You'll almost certainly have seen the URL you want to get to, followed by a bunch of stuff. So a bunch of stuff that starts with a question mark. So in this example at the bottom here, the website is off of our South African website. It's sahill.org, and it's the news story about the selection process for this year's Justice Accelerator. And then there's all this stuff at the end in red, which, sorry, I'm just going to see if I can get this link up so I can show you directly, which doesn't change anything at all from the user point of view. So when somebody clicks on that link, they're still going to go through to the same. Sorry, I've lost this. I need to find this link now. Sorry, I should have made that clickable. Okay, let me grab that link properly. So here we go. Okay, so basically, if I enter, oops, if I enter this URL here, this is a link to our website. When I load it, obviously, I'm going to go to that that page on our website. It's a short story about 4 startups enter the Hill Justice Accelerator in South Africa, legal funding, legal send, Maloa, 3-6 Clover contracts, Maloa, sorry, your name's spelled wrong, I'm going to hide that. Hello, everybody. But if I add this piece of code to the end of that, it doesn't make any difference at all to what's loaded. You just see that in the URL bar here, I've got this extra bit of code in there. Now, this is a very standardized way of doing these codes: UTM source, UTM underscore medium, UTM campaign, all linking back to this sort of standardized way of doing things called the urchin tracking module. So you're adding this urchin at the end of a URL with this standardized information. And when you're looking at the acquisition part of Google Analytics, you'll see it split down into channels, tree maps, source, medium, and that obviously relates to the UTM code source and medium. So this is telling me this comes from an email, and this email was called newsletter, and the campaign was in August. And all of that information, because it's in that particular format, Google can interpret and give you a really accurate breakdown of where traffic is coming from by source and medium. So again, naked data is not the best example because it's quite low traffic, but in here on your site, you might see the source is a newsletter, and it's your newsletter, or it's newsletter, and this is one that comes from email, somebody's MailPoet email. You know, and all this information is being drawn from the UTM codes at the end of your URLs. So when you're looking at testing different marketing messages, this is really important to build into your URL. So if you want to see if more people came from a particular tweet, for example, if you've got a campaign with 3 tweets, you might each give them slightly different UTM codes, so you can see which one people are actually clicking on to get to your site. And this gives us a good way of A/B testing different marketing messages, different things we're putting out on social media. There's a couple of tools. Google has a tool for creating URLs, including UTM codes. I didn't record the link to it, but it does exist. What's it called? UTM URL creator, something like that. There we go, campaign URL builder. So in here, you can just put your website. If it's, you know, you can, if you're not sure how to create these by yourselves, this is now going to give me the link at the bottom here. SA Hill source medium campaign that I just need to copy, or I can even feed that into a link shortener, and it will give me the still direct me to the right link when it comes to our website. So really good way of tracking things coming into the site. I also use a similar process for tracking movement across the site. So if I'm too lazy to go through the whole process of creating an event and adding that piece of code to every link I'm building, or I do a lot of work in WordPress, and WordPress can strip excess HTML from tags sometimes, and sometimes it will take out the event tags that I've put in. One foolproof way of tracking movement across the site is to use the same principle, but instead of creating a full UTM code, if I just start a suffix to the URL with a question mark, I can say this is coming from, say, the subs button, and now this will show up as a separate URL on my analytics. So just as an example of that, I'll go to naked data. So real time now, we should see, let me turn off my, so having hosted an hour and a half talking about analytics, I use a lot of privacy protecting stuff that stops people tracking my movement online. But I can see there's one person on the homepage right now on naked data, and that's obviously me because I've got that open now. But I can just tweak this URL. To add question mark equals Adam at the end. And now what I should see in real time when this updates, this should change to say question mark Adam. There we go. There I am. So now this is a sort of rough and ready, low effort way of starting to do a little bit of extra audience segmentation or building and tracking codes and just putting them straight into the URL. So again, you know, where I use this a lot in work is to say if I've got 2 subscribe buttons that both lead to the subscribe page, I might add question mark equals top and question mark equals bottom. And now I can see by looking at the difference in URL, who's clicked on which button. What is nice about this as well is just going back to that point about how pages are reported in the site content. You see this if you look at the home page here, the / here, there's 37 people looked at the home page, but there's also 3 people here who looked at the home page with a search query attached to it. So this is the home page with the question mark search query equals map. When I look at this as page title, that's now going to aggregate both of those. That should aggregate both of those together. It hasn't. I don't know why it hasn't. Okay. So much, never do a live demo. But what will usually happen is we'll aggregate both of those together, and that should have gone up to 40 page views. So when I'm looking at things by page title, the search queries don't make a difference. They only make a difference when you're looking at it via the page URL. So I've got quite a quick way of looking at total numbers of people who visited a particular page and numbers of people who have visited a page with a search query on. It just didn't work there. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So went through that. The other thing that you'll read a lot about and can be a little bit confusing in Google Analytics is goal conversions. And this is, again, it's one of those things where there's 100 different ways to do anything. So, but if you want to look at how many people bought a product, for example, we can do that by looking at, you know, your product database is probably the first place you'd look at. If I want to look at the kinds of people who bought a product, then I might look at the payment completed page and the sort of traffic that was passing through that page. The other way to do it is to use the goals setup in analytics. And this is really straightforward and nowhere near as complicated as it seems when you start reading some of the information about it. Oh, sorry, I don't have permission to create a new goal in here, but I can create a goal that says, you know, this goal completion is when somebody views 3 pages, or this goal completion is when somebody views this particular page on site, or this goal completion is when somebody triggers this event if it's click on button. The difference between goal conversions and looking at the same data in the behavior view is that you can attach extra information to the goal conversions for quick reference. So I can attach a value to every goal. For example, I can say that when somebody clicks on this link, that's worth 10 Rand to me. So I can get a quick top level piece of data that tells me how much money I've earned through a particular channel at the top. The other thing about goal conversions is about setting something up as a goal conversion rather than a URL query or an event, is that in analytics, in the top level dashboard, you've got this really handy option to view the reverse goal path. Sorry, I'm just going to pause the recording again so I can show you this with some real notes. Sorry. So sorry, I didn't record the last few minutes, so I'm so sorry about that. If anybody's just joined us looking at the playback, I switched it off and forgot to turn it back on again. But what we've done so far is a very whistle-stop tour of kind of some of the most important features of analytics, which aren't immediately obvious without a guide to just point out where they are. Once you know where they are, there's a whole internet full of help to help you exploit them. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was custom dashboards, because obviously this is all really useful stuff to know, but when I'm trying to figure out, you know, how many times did Adam come to the site over this period of time compared to a V-Wave, I've given them both unique URLs. I don't want to keep clicking between all of the different different headings and features on the left, or downloading the data into something else every time. So it's really useful to know about the custom dashboards and learn how to start building those, so you can get a snapshot of what's happening on your site over a period of time, or in real time, and especially with custom dimensions, the only way to really get the custom dimension data in a useful form inside Google Analytics itself is to add it to a dashboard. So dashboards basically, and again, this goes back to those first two questions. How does all this relate back to development and design or product development, and how do we use it to guide our creatives? We get the right information in front of us when we need it. So I would strongly recommend building a dashboard that shows you exactly what you want to need, that's going to report on the experiment you're running without having to dig through all of the different sections in Google Analytics to get the data from different elements of what's been captured. So just to give you a quick example, this is the sort of standard real-time dashboard that Google throws up when you log in under Home. So it gives you a little bit of information about you know, how traffic's been over the last week, how many people are on a site right now, this month compared to last month, heat map of time of day, country, all of that. So really useful information, but not necessarily what I want to know. So one thing that I was playing around with, this is a dashboard that we use a lot for overhead displays. This is obviously not running on Mail and Guardian data. This is running on naked data, but it tells me, you know, it gives me a different way of carving up that information. It's basically the same information that's in the Home dashboard, but it's just presented in a way that makes a little bit more sense for me and for my colleagues. And particularly, you know, I've got a block here that instead of looking at what page people have read, what pages have been popular by URL, doing that aggregation thing and aggregating them by page title, so we can see, you know, in human format what's been popular on site. I separate out real-time users and real-time AMP users, because a lot of our traffic comes from those Google sources that prefer AMP, Google Discover, Google News. I've got a real-time map to tell me where people are coming from, but also what source is popular right now. So people coming from Google or Facebook or Twitter, where are they coming to the site from at any given time? Creating a dashboard is, you know, pretty straightforward. Every one of these elements is a widget. If you want to add a widget, you click on the Add Widget button, and then you've got standard metrics and real-time metrics. So if I wanted a bar chart of how many, okay, let's do something standard. page load time. What does that maybe say about it? Page load time by browser. I've no idea what this is going to throw up. I haven't tested this all at all. But this is now going to throw. There's no data. Nobody's looked at it. But this would give me a quick bar chart of page load time in milliseconds by browser. So is it loading faster on mobile or faster on desktop and things like that? Sorry, never do a live demo. I keep telling myself this. I keep trying to do it, and it doesn't work. Building a dashboard. It's like I say. It's what you need on a day-to-day basis is not going to be what's in the standard Google dashboard. So do play around with that. There's some standardized dashboard templates oh no, they're links to Data Studio, sorry, ignore me. So that's really useful if everybody has access to the Google Analytics account in your business and is happy to log in there and view it in Google Analytics. But it's also a little bit limited in that the depending on what you're tracking and how you're tracking it, you might need to set up multiple dashboards and keep flicking between the two and stuff like that. So the other tool that I'd really recommend you get to grips with is so sorry, that dashboard that I built. So there's a link in here, so you can add it to your own Google Analytics account if you're keen. But the other thing that I'd really recommend you get to learn to use is Google Data Studio. And the reason is Google Data Studio plugs straight into Google Analytics. As long as you're using the same Google account, you can load data from Google Analytics into Google Data Studio and build very specific dashboards that are linked to your pirate metrics that show you straight away, I'm running this experiment. What is the result of this experiment that tells me, the top level information I need, and I can paginate reports in Google Analytics to show you a lot of information about the site as it comes in. So I'm just going to pull datastudio.google.com and if you want to plug in analytics data to a Data Studio report, as soon as you create one, you've got an option as to where the data source is coming from. In this case, you want it to come from Google Analytics. I want it to come from Naked Data, the site I've been showing you. The all website view, the default view from Naked Data, and now, yeah, happy to add that to the report. And now I can straight away start creating charts and tables that are coming from all website data over here from Naked Data. So this is telling me again, you'll recognize these numbers from this is actually telling me new users, which I don't really want. If I go to page views, add metric, add a time control for, it's going to default to the last 7 days. So this is telling me page views for Naked Data for the last 7 days, and I can obviously change this. Oops, different time periods there, and switch between view mode and edit mode. This is where, and then I can start adding different charts relating to that data. So if I wanted to pull out page views over time. Again, that's defaulted to page views over time there, so I can see my page views over time map, and I can start overlaying that with other data. So if I wanted to overlay that with my total users, there we go. Now I've got 2 charts running side by side, one of which is page views, one of which is users, and I can start building a dashboard that's going to be really deeply meaningful to me. So how do we link all this back to product design and all of the other stuff we've been talking about? For me, the answer is starting to use dashboards that answer that specific questions, those specific questions that we're looking for. And the more specific we can be, you know, what is it we're trying to move with this experiment? How are we measuring that? Building the dashboard that that gets us there is really the idea. And yeah, that is right bang on time. So there's only a couple of minutes left, unfortunately, but there haven't been many questions throughout. I'm happy to hang around for a little bit if anybody's got anything they wanted to ask or go over again, or places where they want to call me out as an idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about because we do it like this and it's much better. Or yeah, please, yeah, any closing thoughts from people?
Thank you, Adam. This was very, very informative. I look forward to exploring some of the directions that you've highlighted here. I remember using Google Analytics. I mean, the first time it actually meant something to me was when we had the real-time window permanently open in our then office. This was several years ago, actually. And, you know, we hit 1,000 live visitors, you know, so seeing that was very fulfilling. So GA has been a part of my life since then. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's a great example of where, you know, where really customizing that dashboard can make I mean, it's a really useful thing just to inspire the team as well. If you can start creating those custom dashboards that give you, this is how many people are online, this is how many people have actually bought something in the last 5 minutes. Yeah, it's definitely strong use cases to put up on that big flat screen TV in the office and make sure everyone can see it all the time.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, William. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Any other comments or questions or observations before we wrap up? Yeah, go ahead, Amir. No. Cool. Okay then.
Hello?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So for us, this is going to be very helpful. We've tried to use Google Analytics from our end, but what's new to me, and I'm not sure if my team member to be new to them, is the studio, right? The data studio thing. I think they're very resourceful, and we're going to see how to deploy them and make them very useful, right? So thank you very much for this session.
Yeah, cool. And if anybody has follow-up questions or anything, anything they're going over the notes and isn't making sense, or wants some advice, you know, feel free to drop me an email, or I think are we all using the community Slack channel now? Is that I don't know how widely that's being used for the current cohort, but you can also get hold of me there if you prefer. Yeah, and yeah, we'll look at cool doing it again. But cool, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot, Adam. It was a great session, very productive. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Alec. Good to know. Good to know that people are getting something out of it. Especially, you know, I know you've got a very technical team, so glad it could be of use